The silent sector, the galaxy had rules. Every civilized species understood them. When faced with overwhelming force, you retreated. When your shields failed, you surrendered. When the odds turned impossible, you called for backup and waited. These were not suggestions. They were survival instincts written into the genetic code of every thinking species across 1,000 worlds. Except one. But the Galactic Council didn't know that yet. The expedition that failed ambassador, Keleth of the Vryn Confederation, stood before the emergency assembly, his forearms trembling. The holographic chamber buzzed with confused murmurs from representatives of 40 different species. Each one wondered why they had been summoned with such urgency. Keleth's voice cracked as he spoke. 3 cycles ago, we sent our finest research fleet into the silent sector. 12 ships, 400 scientists, the best minds from 8 different worlds. He paused, his breathing apparatus hissing. 2 days ago, we received their final transmission. The hologram flickered to life. Static filled the air, then resolved into chaos. Screaming, explosions. A Vryn captain shouting orders before the screen went dark. In those final seconds, something massive moved through the frame, something ancient and hungry. The assembly erupted. Council Speaker Threven, a towering Korthan with crystalline skin, raised all 6 of his hands for silence. What was it? Keleth's response was barely a whisper. The Devourers. Silence fell like a stone into deep water. Every species had legends about them. Ancient machines left behind by a dead civilization, programmed to consume everything in their path. Most believed they were myths. Stories to frighten young ones. How many? Threven asked. We detected 47 vessels before we lost contact. They're spreading outward from the silent sector. Keleth displayed a star map. Red markers bloomed like infection across dozens of systems. At current speed, they will reach inhabited space in 16 days. Counselor Yara of the Peaceful Tribe spoke next, her voice heavy with sorrow. We must evacuate. Alert every world in their path. Evacuate 12 systems, another counselor shouted. Impossible. We're talking about billions of lives. Arguments broke out across the chamber. Some demanded military intervention. Others insisted on diplomatic contact. A few simply shut down their holograms and disconnected entirely, unwilling to face the horror. Threven's voice cut through the chaos. Who can we call? Who has the military strength to face this threat? The question hung in the air like smoke. The Korthan defense fleet was powerful but slow. The Vryn had lost their best ships already. The Zelnith Armada was 3 weeks away at minimum. Every military force in known space was either too far, too weak, or too busy with their own problems. There is one possibility, a small voice said. Everyone turned. It was Ambassador Prella, representative of the Minith Collective. Her species was small, barely reaching the waist of most other delegates, but they had the most extensive trade networks in the galaxy. The humans, she continued. Their territory is only 4 days from the silent sector. Laughter rippled through some delegates. Humans, the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel. They had been part of the galactic community for barely 20 years. They had 36 colonies and a modest military fleet. What could they possibly do? The humans are children, Keleth said dismissively. They have no experience with threats of this magnitude. Prella's large eyes blinked slowly. They also have no sense of when to quit. I have traded with them for 10 years. They are stubborn beyond reason and refuse to accept limitations. Perhaps that is what we need. Threven considered this. Very well. Send the distress call to human space. Send it to everyone. Maybe someone will answer. The message travels. The distress signal burst across subspace frequencies, carrying with it detailed scans of the Devourer fleet, projected trajectories, and a simple plea encoded in every known language. Wei Shen, danger, peril. Help us. It reached the Korthan homeworld, where military strategists ran simulations and determined intervention would result in unacceptable losses. It reached the Zelnith systems, where admirals calculated they couldn't possibly arrive in time. It reached 100 other worlds where leaders looked at the data and made the logical choice. They did nothing. The signal reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Marcus Chen sat in the Strategic Command Center in Geneva, reviewing routine patrol reports when the alert came through. His communication officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, turned from her console with wide eyes. Admiral, we're receiving a Galactic Council emergency broadcast. Priority classification Omega. Chen had been in the military for 35 years. He had never seen an Omega classification. Put it through. The hologram materialized. Ambassador Kelleth's recorded message played. The footage of the Devourer attack followed. Chen watched in silence as ships were torn apart, as the ancient machines spread across the star map like a plague. Estimated time until they reach human territory? Chen asked quietly. Kim worked her console. If they maintain current trajectory and speed, 23 days, sir. And the nearest inhabited systems in their path? The Vrin colony at Helios Prime, population 2 million. They have 11 days. Chen stood and walked to the massive display showing human-controlled space, their little corner of the galaxy. 42 worlds. 8 billion people spread across the stars. They were so new to all this, so small compared to the great powers. He thought about his daughter on Mars, his grandson on Europa Station, his wife buried on Earth. Contact Fleet Command, he said. Initiate Protocol, Guardian. I want every available warship ready to deploy in 6 hours. Kim hesitated. Sir, Guardian Protocol requires approval from the Security Council. That could take days, Chen's jaw set. Then we'll apologize later. Get me the fleet. The fleet assembles in orbit around Earth, Mars, Titan, and a dozen other worlds. Ships began to move. The Terran Navy had been built for defense, designed to protect the young human colonies from pirates and smugglers. They had never faced a real war. That was about to change. 37 warships gathered at the rally point beyond Neptune. They ranged from massive carriers like the TNS Indomitable to swift destroyers and support frigates. It wasn't much compared to the ancient powers of the galaxy, but it was everything humanity could spare. Admiral Chen transferred his command to the Indomitable and addressed the fleet. You've all seen the data. The Galactic Council sent out a distress call. Most species are choosing to evacuate or hide. We're choosing to fight. He paused, looking at the faces on his screen. Young and old. Veterans and rookies. Every one of them had volunteered when they heard the news. I won't lie to you. The odds are terrible. These Devourer machines have destroyed everything they've encountered. We're probably going to take heavy losses. Command has authorized full combat protocols. Anyone who wants to can transfer to defensive positions. No one will think less of you. Not a single person moved. Chen felt something tight in his chest loosen. Then let's go answer the call. All ships jump on my mark. Destination Silent Sector 321 mark space folded. 37 human warships vanished in bursts of twisted light, racing toward a battle that every logical species had already declared unwinnable. Arrival. The human fleet dropped out of FTL 4 days later at the edge of the Silent Sector. Sensors immediately lit up with contacts. Hundreds of them. Devourer signatures confirmed, Kim reported. 53 capital ships. Multiple smaller craft. They're surrounding something. The tactical display resolved. The Devourer fleet had cornered the remnants of the Vrin expedition near a dying star. 3 damaged science vessels were attempting to hold position behind a debris field, while enemy fire hammered their shields. They're still alive, Chen breathed. All ships battle formation Sierra 7. Let's make some noise. The human fleet accelerated, fusion drives burning bright against the darkness. They arranged themselves in a loose sphere, weapons charging, point defense systems active. The Devourers noticed them immediately. 20 of the ancient machines broke off from the main fleet and turned toward the newcomers. Their ships were massive, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Weapons ports glowed with sickly green energy. Incoming transmission from the Vrin ships, Kim said. A hologram appeared. Captain Varix of the Vrin looked haggard, his uniform torn. Unknown fleet, identify yourself. This is a death trap. You must flee while you can. Chen smiled grimly. This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Navy. We received your distress call. Varix's eyes widened in disbelief. Terran, but you're so far from home. Your species is too young for this fight. You must retreat. Respectfully, Captain, we didn't come all this way to run. Hold your position. We're coming to get you. You don't understand, Varix shouted. These machines cannot be reasoned with. They do not feel pain or fear. They will destroy you. Chen's expression hardened. Then they'll learn something new today. They'll learn what happens when you threaten people we've decided to protect. All ships weapons free. Let's show them what humans do. The Devourer fleet opened fire. Green energy beams cut through space like blades. and the human fleet charged straight into them. When stubbornness becomes strength, the first salvo from the Devourer fleet should have ended the battle before it began. 20 massive warships, each one a relic from a civilization that had mastered death itself, unleashed torrents of energy that could vaporize asteroids. Their targeting systems, ancient but flawless, locked onto the approaching human vessels with cold precision. But the humans didn't follow the rules. The dance begins. Commander Rachel Torres stood on the bridge of the destroyer TNS Relentless, watching the green death racing toward them. Every instinct screamed to pull back, to evade, to survive. Instead, she leaned forward. All power to forward shields. Angle 45 degrees starboard. On my mark, full burn straight at them. Her executive officer, Lieutenant Hayes, stared at her. Commander, that's suicide. That's the plan. Mark. The Relentless dove forward, her engines screaming. The Devourer beam struck the angled shield and deflected, the energy sliding off like water from a sloped roof. The destroyer shuddered from the impact but held. Around her, 6 other human ships executed the same insane maneuver, charging the enemy line at angles that turned their shields into deflection surfaces rather than barriers. It was a tactic born from humanity's naval history, from the age of ironclad warships that angled their armor to bounce cannonballs. No species in the galaxy fought this way. Energy shields were meant to absorb damage, not redirect it. The very idea was inefficient, wasteful, dangerous. It was also working. The Relentless closed to point-blank range with the Devourer ship, her nose almost touching the ancient hull. At this distance, the enemy's massive weapons couldn't track fast enough. Torres grinned. All weapons, concentrated fire. Target their weapon clusters. Pour everything in. Railguns hammered. Missiles streaked across the tiny gap. Laser batteries carved molten lines across the Devourer's hull. The ancient machine tried to adjust, tried to bring smaller weapons to bear, but the Relentless was already spinning away, making room for the next ship in line. 7 human destroyers executed a brutal close-range carousel, each one taking turns to dash in, unleash hell, and spin away before the Devourers could effectively respond. It was chaotic, dangerous, and completely unpredictable. Admiral Chen watched from the Indomitable as his destroyers wreaked havoc. Carrier groups deploy fighters. I want them inside that formation, targeting engines and sensor arrays. Cruiser squadron, split formation and hit them from both flanks. The human fleet broke apart like a shattering mirror, each piece moving with purpose. Fighter craft, small and fast, swarmed between the massive Devourer ships like angry hornets. The cruisers, heavier and more powerful, hammered the enemy from unexpected angles. Aboard the damaged Vryn science vessel, Captain Varix watched in stunned silence. His sensor officer, Lieutenant Cray, couldn't stop her hands from shaking as she reported. Captain, the humans are inside the Devourer formation. They're fighting at ranges where one mistake means instant death. They're not following any tactical doctrine I've ever seen. Varix's 4 eyes tracked the battle. The humans moved like no military force he had ever encountered. There was coordination, yes, but also improvisation. Ships broke formation to pursue opportunities, then reformed seconds later. It was organized chaos, and somehow impossibly it was working. They fight like they have nothing to lose, he whispered. The Devourer response. The ancient machines were learning. They had existed for millennia, had destroyed countless civilizations, had adapted to every tactic thrown at them. They began to change their patterns, to predict the human movements, to tighten their formation. 3 human destroyers were caught in a crossfire. The TNS Valiant took a direct hit that overwhelmed her shields and carved through her hull. Atmosphere vented into space as the ship listed dying. Valiant is down, Kim reported, her voice tight. 70% casualties. They're abandoning ship. Chen felt each loss like a physical blow, but he couldn't stop. Mark the survivors. We'll collect them later. All ships they're adapting. Switch to Pattern Omega. Pattern Omega was something they had developed during the 4-day journey. It was based on an old Earth strategy called Wolfpack Tactics, borrowed from submarine warfare. The fleet broke into small groups of 3 or 4 ships that operated independently, attacking targets of opportunity, supporting each other, and vanishing before the enemy could concentrate fire. The Devourers found themselves fighting not one fleet, but a dozen small packs that struck from every direction. Every time they focused on one group, another would tear into their flanks. It was exhausting, chaotic, and brutally effective, but it was also costly. The destroyer TNS Thunderchild took a hit that crippled her engines. Rather than float helpless, her captain, Commander James Wright, made a decision. He aimed his dying ship at the nearest devourer and pushed his reactor to critical. All hands, this is the captain. Abandon ship. Life pods away. Now. His crew evacuated in seconds, trained and efficient. Wright stayed on the bridge, watching the devourer grow larger in his viewport. He thought about his son back on Earth, probably playing in the park right now. He thought about the Vryn civilians they were protecting, people he would never meet. He thought it was worth it. The Thunderchild struck the devourer at a significant fraction of light speed. Her reactor detonated on impact, a miniature sun blooming in the darkness. When the light faded, both ships were gone, reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Aboard the Indomitable, Chen closed his eyes for just a moment, honoring the sacrifice. Then he opened them and continued the fight. The memory of why Lieutenant Kim worked her console, coordinating the fleet's movements, when something caught her attention. "Admiral, I'm receiving a transmission from the Vryn flagship. They're asking why we're doing this." Chen almost laughed. Why? Because that's what humans did. Because 20 years ago, when humanity had first stumbled into the galaxy, scared and alone, it had been a Vryn trader who had helped them navigate their first trade route. It had been Korthan engineers who had shared shield technology. It had been the Minith who had welcomed human merchants with open arms. The galaxy had given humanity a chance. Now it was humanity's turn to return the favor. But there was more to it than that. Chen remembered his own first year in space. Fresh out of the academy, his ship had responded to a distress call from a civilian transport caught in an asteroid field. They had risked everything to pull those people out. When asked why, his captain had said something that stayed with him forever. Because if we don't help, who will? And if we wait for someone else to be brave, then bravery ceases to exist. Humans had a saying. It wasn't the strongest species that survived, nor the most intelligent, but the one most adaptable to change. Humanity had learned to adapt by never accepting that something was impossible, by refusing to quit even when quitting made sense, by being too stubborn to know when they were beaten. "Tell them," Chen said quietly, "that we're doing this because someone has to, and because no one else answered the call." The turning point, the battle had raged for 3 hours. The human fleet had been reduced to 21 operational ships. They had destroyed 8 Devourer vessels and damaged a dozen more, but the ancient machines kept coming, kept adapting, kept fighting with emotionless efficiency. Chen studied the tactical display. The Vryn ships were secure now, protected by a screen of human vessels. They could evacuate. They could run. They had done their job, but the Devourer fleet was still here, still active. And if they let them go, those machines would continue spreading, consuming, destroying. "Admiral," Torres reported from the Relentless, "we've analyzed their formation. There's a flagship, a command ship. It's coordinating their movements. If we take it out, the others might lose cohesion." Chen saw it too, a massive Devourer vessel at the center of their formation, larger than the others, covered in communication arrays. It was protected by layers of smaller ships, a fortress within a fortress. "It's a trap," Kim said. "They're using it as bait. Any ship that gets close will be torn apart." Chen nodded slowly. "Not if we all go at once. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. I'm transmitting coordinates for a synchronized strike. Every vessel, every weapon focused on one target. We're going to punch through their lines and take out their command ship." There was a pause, then responses flooded in. Acknowledgements from every captain. No hesitation. No debate. The human fleet regrouped, forming a spearhead formation. It was textbook tactics, the kind of maneuver taught in every military academy across the galaxy. The Devourers recognized it immediately and adjusted their positions to counter. What they didn't expect was the ferocity. The human fleet didn't just attack. They threw themselves forward with reckless abandon, shields at maximum, weapons firing continuously. They absorbed hits that would have made other species retreat. They pushed through barriers that should have been impenetrable. The carrier Indomitable led the charge, her massive bulk shrugging off hits that crippled smaller vessels. Fighters swarmed ahead, clearing a path. Destroyers followed, widening the breach. Cruisers poured fire into the gaps, and at the center of it all, Admiral Chen stood on his bridge and refused to blink. Victory's price, they reached the command ship. 21 human vessels surrounded it, weapons locked. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then every ship fired at once. The Devourer command ship's shields flared, held for 3 seconds, then shattered. The ancient hull, strong enough to survive millennia, cracked under the concentrated assault. Internal explosions rippled across its surface. Secondary detonations followed. And then, with a flash of light that illuminated the entire battlefield, it came apart. The effect was immediate. The remaining Devourer ships stopped moving. Their coordination vanished. They began to drift, weapons going dark like puppets with cut strings. Silence fell across the fleet. Then slowly cheers began to echo through every human ship. They had won. Against impossible odds, against ancient nightmares, they had won. Chen sagged in his command chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. Damage report. Kim's voice was hoarse. 16 ships operational. 5 heavily damaged. We've lost over 2,000 crew. But Admiral, we did it. We actually did it. A transmission came through from Captain Varix. The Vryn appeared on screen, tears streaming down his face. Admiral Chen, I have no words. You saved us. You saved all of us. Why? Why would you risk so much for strangers? Chen looked at the stars beyond his viewport, at the debris field where brave people had died, at the distant sun that had witnessed humanity's first real battle in space. Because that's who we are, Captain. Humans have a saying. We leave no one behind. Not our own. Not our friends. Not even people we just met. The galaxy is big and dark and dangerous, but it's also full of people worth protecting. So when someone calls for help, we answer. He smiled tiredly. Besides, we're too stubborn to know when to quit. Epilogue. A new understanding. The news spread across the galaxy within days. Humanity, the youngest species, the newcomers who barely understood galactic politics, had done what no one else would. They had answered the call. They had faced the Devourers and won. In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Prella stood before the assembled delegates. I told you, she said simply. Humans don't know when to quit. Perhaps that makes them foolish. Or perhaps it makes them exactly what we need. Threven, the council speaker, nodded slowly. The council proposes a formal alliance with humanity, not as junior partners but as equals. They have earned it with blood and courage. The vote was unanimous. On Earth, in the Strategic Command Center, Admiral Chen received word of the alliance. He thought about the crews they had lost, the ships destroyed, the families who would mourn. He thought about the Vryn civilians they had saved, the worlds they had protected, the future they had secured. It had been worth it. Because when darkness came and everyone else looked away, humanity had looked toward it and charged. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were too stubborn, too determined, too human to do anything else. The galaxy had called, and humanity had answered, because that's what humans do.